The bustling streets of New York City seemed indifferent to everyone who walked them. Amidst the cacophony of honking horns, chattering pedestrians, and the occasional rumble of a subway below, there was one man who moved like a ghost. Victor Grayson, a millionaire with a fortune built on ruthless corporate takeovers, was a shadow of the lively man he had once been. At 57, he had all the wealth one could imagine: luxurious cars, sprawling estates, and an enviable art collection. But none of it mattered anymore. Victor wasn't always this way. Once upon a time, he was a young entrepreneur with a fire in his belly, a twinkle in his eye, and a deep, resonating laugh that echoed through boardrooms. But time had stripped him of his joy, and success had robbed him of something even more precious: human connection. After losing his wife in a tragic car accident 12 years earlier, he had gradually withdrawn into himself. His mansion on the Upper East Side was a gilded prison, filled with everything he could buy, but devoid of anyone who cared. On this particular Tuesday evening, Victor strolled aimlessly through Washington Square Park, his designer trench coat shielding him from the autumn chill. The park was alive with artists, skateboarders, and musicians vying for attention. Victor moved past them, as invisible to the crowd as they were to him. But then, a melody caught his ear, something haunting yet strangely uplifting. He turned toward the sound and saw a young man sitting on a worn folding chair. The musician's guitar had seen better days, its wood scratched and its strings visibly frayed. Yet, in his hands, it sang with a raw, unpolished beauty. The musician himself was a contradiction. Messy brown hair framed a face that seemed far older than his years, and his jacket had patches stitched with care. A sign rested at his feet: "Anything helps. Thank you." Victor stood transfixed as the young man played. The notes weren't perfect, and the rhythm stumbled occasionally, but there was something about it, a kind of honesty that cut through the noise of the world. When the music stopped, the young man looked up. His brown eyes locked onto Victor's, and he gave a small, tired smile. "Like the show?" the musician asked, his voice raspy but warm. Victor hesitated, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to casual conversation. Finally, he nodded. "Yes, it was unexpected." The musician chuckled softly. "Unexpected, huh? I'll take it. Name's Jesse, by the way." Victor's lips twitched as if they were trying to form a smile. "Victor." "Well, Victor," Jesse said, gesturing to the nearly empty guitar case at his feet. "Got any requests? I'm taking tips in the form of spare change, profound advice, or sandwiches." The joke was disarming. Against his better judgment, Victor pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and dropped it into the case. Jesse's eyes widened. "Man, I was kidding about the sandwiches," he said, laughing. "This is... wow." "Thank you." Victor shrugged, already regretting the gesture. He wasn't sure why he had done it. Something about Jesse's unguarded smile unsettled him. It was too genuine, too raw. Victor wasn't ready for that kind of honesty. With a curt nod, he turned and walked away, the sound of Jesse's voice trailing after him. "Hey, Victor, thanks for listening. Come back sometime." Victor didn't answer, but as he made his way back to his cold, empty mansion, he realized something strange. For the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. Victor couldn't explain why the memory of the street musician lingered in his mind. For days, Jesse's music played in a loop inside his head, like a melody he couldn't shake off. It wasn't just the music, it was Jesse himself. The way he smiled, his casual humor, and the light in his eyes despite his worn-out circumstances. Victor had spent years surrounded by people who faked smiles, yet here was someone who seemed to mean every word he said. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, Victor found himself back in Washington Square Park. He told himself it was a coincidence, that he was merely enjoying the fresh air. But deep down, he knew better. As he approached the park's fountain, he heard it again. That same guitar, that same raw, soulful sound. Jesse was in his usual spot, head bent over his guitar, playing as if the world around him didn't exist. Victor stood at a distance, watching. Today, the crowd around Jesse was larger, but the young man seemed oblivious to their stares. His music had a magnetism, drawing people in without effort. Victor felt something stir within him, a strange combination of envy and admiration. When Jesse finished his song, the small crowd clapped politely before dispersing. Victor hesitated, then stepped forward. "Back for an encore?" Jesse asked, grinning as he recognized Victor. "I didn't think millionaires made a habit of slumming it in the park." Victor stiffened, unsure whether Jesse was teasing or mocking him. "What makes you think I'm a millionaire?" Jesse shrugged, his smile widening. "The coat, the watch, the shoes. Take your pick. You're either loaded or moonlighting as a fashion model." Victor chuckled, caught off guard by Jesse's easy charm. "I suppose I should take that as a compliment." "You should," Jesse said. "So what brings you back? Don't tell me I'm your new favorite artist." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just say I had some free time." Jesse studied him for a moment, then nodded as if he understood something Victor didn't. "Well, since you're here, have a seat." Victor hesitated, then lowered himself onto the bench next to Jesse. For a moment they sat in silence, the city's noise filling the space between them. Then Jesse picked up his guitar and began strumming softly. "Do you play?" Jesse asked, glancing at Victor. Victor shook his head. "Number I never had the patience for it." "Shame," Jesse said, his fingers dancing over the strings. "Music's good for the soul. Cheaper than therapy, too." Victor smiled faintly. "And yet here you are, playing for spare change." Jesse laughed, the sound surprisingly rich and carefree. "Touché. But hey, everyone's got their hustle. Some people trade stocks. I trade melodies." Victor didn't reply. He was too busy studying Jesse, his calloused hands, the way his body swayed slightly with the music, the spark in his eyes that seemed to defy the weight of his struggles. For reasons he couldn't quite articulate, Victor felt drawn to this young man. He wanted to know more about him, about the life that had shaped him into someone who could still smile despite the odds. "What's your story, Jesse?" Victor asked suddenly. Jesse stopped playing and leaned back, his expression unreadable. "That's a loaded question." "I've got time," Victor said quietly. Jesse studied him again, then sighed. "All right, Mr. Millionaire, but it's not exactly a fairy tale." And with that, Jesse began to talk. Jesse leaned back on the bench, resting his guitar against his knee. He gazed out at the park, as if searching for the right words in the autumn breeze. "I grew up in a small town, nothing like this place," Jesse began, his tone light, though his eyes held a shadow. "Mom worked 2 jobs. Dad was, well, let's just say he wasn't around much. Music was my escape, an old guitar my uncle gave me when I was 10. It was beat up, missing a string, but it was mine." Victor listened in silence, his sharp mind absorbing every detail. He could sense there was more to the story, something Jesse wasn't saying outright. I taught myself to play by watching videos at the library, Jesse continued. We didn't have internet at home, so I'd sneak off after school and spend hours there. By the time I was 16, I could play pretty much anything by ear. I thought maybe music would be my ticket out, you know? Victor nodded, recognizing the spark of youthful ambition in Jesse's voice. What happened? Jesse's smile faltered, replaced by a weary expression. Life happened. Mom got sick. Cancer. I dropped out of high school to take care of her. The bills piled up faster than I could keep track of. After she passed, I didn't have much left. No money, no family, just this guitar. For a moment, Jesse's voice broke, but he quickly regained his composure. So, I packed up and came here. Figured if I was going to struggle, I might as well do it in a city that never sleeps. Been playing on these streets ever since. Victor felt a pang of guilt. His wealth could have solved every problem Jesse had faced, yet here he was, a silent witness to the young man's struggles. But what struck him most was Jesse's resilience. Despite everything, he had survived. Do you ever think about giving up? Victor asked quietly. Jesse shrugged. Every day. But then I remember my mom. She never gave up on me, even when life gave her every reason to. So I keep playing. Some days people stop and listen. Other days I'm invisible. But as long as I've got this guitar, I'm still standing. Victor looked at Jesse, truly looked at him, and felt something shift inside. This young man, with his patched jacket and frayed strings, was the embodiment of strength. Victor realized he had spent years hiding from life, drowning in his own loneliness, while Jesse had faced his pain head-on and kept moving forward. You're stronger than most people I know, Victor said softly. Jesse grinned, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thanks, but I'm just doing what I can to get by. Everyone's got their own battles, right? Victor nodded, though he wasn't sure he agreed. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe, or purpose. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew one thing. This wasn't the last time he would sit on this bench with Jesse. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in golden light, Victor stood to leave. I'll see you again, Jesse. Jesse smiled. I'll be here. Same time, same place. As Victor walked away, he felt lighter, as if the weight of his loneliness had begun to lift. He didn't yet know what he could do to help Jesse, but one thing was clear. He wanted to try. Victor returned to his mansion that evening, but for the first time in years, the silence felt unbearable. The high ceilings and pristine decor, once symbols of his success, now seemed cold and hollow. He found himself pacing his study, Jesse's story replaying in his mind like a haunting melody. Unable to sleep, Victor opened his laptop and began researching. He learned about the struggles of street musicians, their challenges, and the rare instances when their talent had been recognized. He stumbled across videos of unknown artists who became sensations because someone had believed in them. As he watched, a thought began to form, a daring, almost reckless idea. The next day, Victor returned to Washington Square Park, clutching a black case under his arm. Jesse was already there, his fingers plucking out a lively tune that cut through the city's noise. A few people had gathered around, nodding to the beat or dropping coins into his guitar case. Victor waited until Jesse finished, and the small crowd dispersed. When Jesse looked up and saw Victor, he grinned. "Back again, huh? Starting to think you might actually like my music." Victor smiled faintly. "Maybe I do. But today I brought you something." He handed the black case to Jesse, who looked at it with wide eyes. "What's this?" "Open it and see." Jesse set his guitar aside and unlatched the case. Inside was a gleaming acoustic guitar, its polished wood reflecting the sunlight. It was a top-of-the-line instrument, the kind Jesse could only dream of owning. "Are you serious?" Jesse asked, his voice trembling. "This must have cost a fortune." Victor shrugged. "Consider it an investment. Your old guitar has served you well, but I think you deserve better." Jesse ran his fingers over the strings, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Victor said. "Just play." Jesse picked up the guitar and strummed a chord. The sound was rich and resonant, filling the air with a clarity his old guitar could never achieve. He looked up at Victor, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "This is amazing," Jesse said. "Thank you." "Seriously? Thank you?" Victor nodded, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. "You've got talent, Jesse. Real talent. I think it's time the world heard it." Jesse laughed, though his eyes glistened with emotion. "You sound like you're about to be my manager." "Maybe I am," Victor said, only half joking. For the next hour, Jesse played with a renewed energy, the new guitar inspiring him to try bolder melodies and more intricate chords. People stopped to listen, some filming with their phones, others clapping enthusiastically. For the first time, Jesse wasn't just a street musician. He was a performer, commanding attention and admiration. As the sun began to set, Jesse looked at Victor. "You didn't have to do this, you know." Victor shrugged. "Maybe I didn't, but I wanted to." Jesse smiled, his gratitude evident. "Well, I won't let you down." Victor didn't respond immediately. He simply watched as Jesse packed up his new guitar, his heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something meaningful, something that went beyond his wealth. As they parted ways, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The next time Victor visited Washington Square Park, he noticed something different. Jesse's usual spot was surrounded by a larger crowd than before. People clapped, swayed to the music, and even whistled in approval. Jesse, with his new guitar in hand, played with a confidence Victor hadn't seen before. His melodies were sharper, his rhythm bolder. He looked like a man transformed. Victor stood at the back of the crowd, quietly observing. He wasn't the type to bask in recognition, but seeing Jesse's growth brought an unexpected sense of pride. Jesse noticed him and gave a quick nod of acknowledgement before launching into another song, this one faster and more vibrant. The crowd loved it. After the set,